3 years ago, I came here to this gorgeous location to do an epic wireless install. That video is called Lake House Wireless. It's on YouTube. I will put a link down in the description if you want to go check it out. Now, that video was interesting because while it was just a residential installation, there were a lot of tricky bits to that installation, such as the fact that there's a boathouse down here at the lake that's very far separated from the main house. The internet comes in from Starlink and a wireless ISP to the bottom, but we had to do some VLAN trickery to get that internet up to the main house where the UDM SE or Dream Machine SE firewall is located. So it's a really cool video. You should go check it out. But since I'm here 3 years later, I figured it's a great time to see how that UniFi network is holding up. When I had filmed the original video, we had planned for Starlink, but the Starlink was not here yet, and now it has been put in place. And let's take a moment here to just admire this gorgeous fabricated Starlink mount on the edge of the dock here. This was the best place where we could get a clear line of sight to the sky. And so we've got a Starlink Gen 2 dish mounted on top. That comes down, it's wired into this pole. It's about a 4-inch aluminum pole here. Goes all the way down and then attaches to the dock. I'll show you that up close in a second. But the wire then runs under the dock, and then we trenched it in here and then up into the bottom of the boathouse here where the receiving equipment is and the start of the UniFi network. One additional bit of configuration that we did while we were here was related to this wireless ISP antenna. So this is the receiving side of a point-to-point link. It's actually a point-to-multipoint link, but this is the station side antenna, and it receives its signal from over here across the lake somewhere. Now that point-to-point wireless link has been working fine. They get about 50 megabits per second across the lake, and everything has been super solid, except the wireless ISP let me know that they had seen some interference, most likely due to the channels that were set to auto on all of the equipment here at the lake house. So they let me know that the channel for their point-to-point link runs in the upper ranges of 5 gigahertz above the DFS channels. So one of the things that I did while I was here is I set not only all of their UniFi access points, but also our point-to-multipoint equipment to channels below the DFS range so that there's no interference whatsoever with the wireless ISP signal coming across the lake. To do that, what you want to do is come into UniFi, click on your devices, and then click on any one of your individual access points. Then you click on settings here in the upper right-hand corner, and here we have all of the individual radio settings. Now for the 5 gigahertz here, if you drop down channels, we can see our DFS channels are this range right here. Then we have 4 channels below and a bunch of channels above as well. The wireless ISP's point-to-multipoint connection operates up here above the DFS channels, I think around 153 or something like that. So I went through and I manually set every single one of their access points to different channels, including the smaller point-to-multipoint that I had set up between the main house and the back house. And then basically you just stagger between these various channels and make sure that there's as little overlap as possible between the different access points. Another thing that I did was I set the channel width to 40 for every single access point except for the one in the main house. So the channel width is how much bandwidth is available to a particular access point. Now 80 megahertz is a lot of bandwidth, and you don't necessarily need that much bandwidth if you're talking about, the access point that's just at the very rear of the house covering the RV parking area, right? We don't need an 80 megahertz channel width back there, so we can set everything else to 40 megahertz and then leave 80 megahertz for the access point that actually has the most connected clients. Everything in regards to the actual UniFi network has been absolutely perfect. There's been no drops, no failed equipment. I've kept everything up to date remotely. However, we did have a couple of issues with this point-to-multipoint setup that we did from the main house over to their back house. So if you recall from the original video, we did this to get a solid connection between these two locations. They're separated by a driveway that we didn't want to trench through, so a point-to-multipoint wireless setup was much better. The main house antenna went offline about 6 months ago or so, and I couldn't figure out why. It was completely offline, so I couldn't troubleshoot it remotely. However, once I got here, I looked up in the network closet and found that they had moved the network rack just a little bit, and in that move, they accidentally unplugged this point-to-multipoint access point. It wasn't completely unplugged, it was just slightly unplugged, but enough so that the power was cut to this device. I plugged it back in, and it came right back online.
And I know what you might be thinking. Chris, you just said the UniFi network was working perfectly for the past 3 years. How can that be possible if the point-to-multipoint link was down? Well, ultimately, the back house and the front house are close enough together that the access points, the UniFi access points, were able to mesh together. And they were still working because of that, right? But mesh is not ideal. A point-to-point or point-to-multipoint connection is always going to be a more solid, stable, reliable connection than trying to mesh access points, especially at, pretty great distances. So while it was technically working, it wasn't ideal. So I definitely wanted to get that point-to-multipoint network fixed.
When that main point-to-point access point came back online, this station side antenna on the house came right back up and connected no problem. But this one was still offline. So this point-to-multipoint station picks up its signal from the main house, and then there's a wire that runs all the way down to the back here, where there's an access point for this RV area in the back. It didn't have any power whatsoever, so all I had to do was pop open this box right here, and inside that box is a dual PoE injector setup. One powers this access point right here, and the other powers the access point around the back side of the house. One of those, the one that powers this point-to-multipoint station side antenna, had died. So luckily I had a spare. I just replaced the 24-volt passive PoE injector inside this box. This came back online and connected no problem. Once all three of the point-to-multipoint antennas were back online, I ran updates, made sure they had the latest and greatest firmware, and everything is working perfectly. Except there is one slight problem. And if you look real closely in here, that's where the access point side of that point-to-multipoint link lives. And since 3 years ago, these trees, there's two of them actually, you can't even see the back one, these trees grew up in front of that antenna. There it is right there, but these trees are effectively blocking some of the line of sight. So the signal to the back house has degraded quite significantly. Now, the owner of the house was telling me he was thinking about cutting down these trees anyways, and when I told him that they were blocking the signal for his wireless antenna, he's like, well, that just gives me the motivation I need to get these trees cut down and out of the way. And can we just take a moment also to appreciate the PlastiDip spray covering that I have on all of these access points? That is holding up beautifully. I mean, look at how nice it still looks, even after 3 years of being out here in the harsh Idaho winters and summers, and it looks a lot better. The PlastiDip looks a lot better than this box that we just spray painted with black paint. So notice like how kind of cruddy that looks. It hasn't held up nearly as well as this PlastiDip on the antenna. Just looks gorgeous. So there we have it, a quick update to the Lake House wireless video. 3 years later, everything is holding up really, really well. And with the additional improvements and the little fixes that I was able to do while I was out here, I'm sure it'll last another 3 years, no problem. All right, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see you in the next one.